Hey, welcome back to Occult Perspectives. This is the fourth Hiram key video that I've done. So if you haven't watched any of the other ones, you might want to go back and watch those, parts 1 through 3. This is part 4. In the last chapter, we read about kind of the structure of the Knights Templar and how they function. And they were accused of heresy, and what they think is that the Templars, basically when they were digging under Herod's temple, that they found these documents or these scrolls, otherwise known as the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that's kind of where we are picking up today. Chapter 4, the Gnostic Connection. So these Dead Sea Scrolls were found at Qumran. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's Qumran. They're caves in the desert 20 miles east of Jerusalem. And so the first body of information was the Dead Sea Scrolls. The second was the Gnostic Gospels, and those were found at Nag Hammadi in Egypt. And essentially this book splits these discoveries into 3 different categories. Those that are known and logged, those destroyed or subsequently lost, and those that have been found but have been kept secret. So what they think, those are basically just the 3 categories of, any documentation or anything that's been found and was either tampered with or, has been manipulated in some way. But they go on to say here, we speculated the Templars had unearthed a collection of writings similar to these recent finds, but they hid them from the gaze of the general world. So it's not so much that they had been lost to everyone, some of this knowledge, like some parties just had exclusive access to it and they had kept it hidden, basically, is what they're trying to say. Let's see here. The term Gnostic used today as a collective name for a range of heretical works which infected the true church for a while in the distant past, but which were outlawed as nonsense imported from other religions. So yeah, essentially, Gnostic is the term for heretical text, but gnosis is Greek for knowledge or understanding. And a lot of people think of this might be just in a linear, like left-brain scientific sense, but not necessarily. True gnosis is like the balance of the 2 hemispheres of the brain. So this would be like enlightenment and being able to have true empathy rather than just being witty or like calculative. Yeah, the Gnostic texts, they do vary quite a bit. Some of them, the stories are a bit ridiculous. Let's see if I can find that one section. Yeah, here we go. Some of these works are bizarre in the extreme, with such stories as the boy Jesus murdering other children in a rage, then returning some of his victims to life. Others are clear and simple philosophical messages attributed to Jesus. So yeah, some of these Gnostic texts are very valid. You can find the correlations and the correspondences that they sync up. But then some of these other texts were, not so sure about. And that's under the headline of the Gnostic Gospels. Oh no, I'm sorry. Any writings describes as Christian Gnosticism. And that ranges from with Indian, Persian, and other influences. And then others are more traditionally Jewish concepts at their heart. Like they have more the Christian theology. They include angels and those kind of beings rather than more the Eastern philosophies or traditions. Let's see. Most Christian Gnostics saw Jesus Christ not as a god, but as the man who illuminated that pathway in the same way that Gautama, Buddha, and Muhammad are understood by their followers. So the whole idea of the Gnostic Christianity versus like what we know typically as like Orthodox Christianity today, the Gnostics really believed that you had the path to Christ consciousness within yourself, and that Jesus was ultimately teaching you how to reach this path on your own. But the modern church, particularly Catholics, believe that this authority comes from outside of you. Like, you have to have, like, it's the priesthood and the bishops and all that stuff that can, like, give you the powers, essentially, or, like, the godhood. But true Gnostics will say that you don't really need any of that stuff, that all the true light really exists within you. Just to kind of clarify that a little bit more before moving on. The Gnostic Gospels have been around as long as the New Testament. That's kind of interesting. The Gnostic Gospels were found by an Arab boy and his brother in a jar. Let me read you this little story real quick here, because I didn't write down the whole thing in my notes. Gnostic Gospels, publication of the translation of 52 papyrus scrolls written in Coptic script, unearthed in December 1947 near the town of Nag Hammadi, if I'm pronouncing that right, in Upper Egypt. These particular documents date from 350 to 400 AD, blah, 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 blah. They were found by an Arab boy called Muhammad Ali al-Salman and his brothers in a sealed red earthenware jar, about 3 feet tall, which was buried in soft soil near to a massive boulder. The brothers had smashed the jar open, hoping to find treasure, but were disappointed to find inside only 13 papyrus books bound in leather. They took the books home, and as they were nice and dry, they were thought to be an excellent material for lighting the family oven. Thankfully, young Muhammad Ali was due to be investigated by the police, so fearful of being accused of stealing the text, he asked a local priest, Al-Kumas, I cannot pronounce the rest of that name, to hide the books for him. Naturally, the priest saw the possible worth of the documents and sent some to Cairo to be valued. And there they kept on passing hands. But yeah, it's an interesting story about how they were found, and they were almost used to like kindle a fire, and that kid had no idea what he had his hands on there. Yeah, these Gospels continued to exchange hands until they came to Professor Quispel of the Young Foundation in Zurich. He was astounded at what he saw and quickly traced the rest of the hoard, which had understandably by then found its way to Coptic Museum in Cairo. He had the opportunity to study the full documentation and found that he was looking at many previously unknown texts that had been buried nearly 1,600 years ago. So this would have been in a period which was critical in the formation of the Roman Catholic Church, which makes sense. Like, these documents would have been suppressed. The rediscovered works had been suppressed by the ecclesiastical Christians as heretical. Yep, there we go. Yeah, so if we would have had a hold of all these sacred texts back in the day, the modern day church as we know it would have definitely ended up being like really, really different. Oh yeah, and for those of you, if this is your first Hiram key video, this is what the Hiram key looks like. I'm sure you can probably get, I think if you Google it, there's some free PDFs on there. It's not a bad book to just have around. It has a lot of reread value. You can go back to it like I am and, you know, take notes and kind of get a better understanding of it. It's a book that I've come back to quite a few times now. Page 38. So really, like the earliest church, the Gnostic church, the whole idea of like an actual like resurrection, like dying and coming back to life, is not really what they had in mind. It was more the idea of a living resurrection. In one of the Gnostic Gospels, there's a quote here, if I can find it. Yeah, there we go. Those who say they will die first and then rise are in error. They must receive the resurrection while they live. So it's basically spiritual enlightenment. I've been doing a lot of Saint Germain studies, the I Am discourses, and listening to the Tao again, and kind of getting back into that understanding of, the truth, getting into the spiritual understanding of things, the infinitude and the eternity of the now. While we're here, there is only ever the now, experiencing itself. Everything that did exist is merely like a perception of the now, and the Tao is like this ever-flowing thing. It's a beautiful philosophy. I highly recommend the Tao Te Ching, or the Tao, D-A-O. That should bring up what you're looking for. There's some really good audiobooks on YouTube. But anyway, yeah, this Gnostic idea of resurrection is totally different. Enlightenment while you're still alive, essentially. And that's kind of what the whole theme of the third degree is in Freemasonry. The living resurrection, it's you have been reborn symbolically. But on a deeper spiritual level, if you go through real initiation and really deep understanding and go deep into yourself, you will have an actual you will have, basically the level of your spiritual resurrection is gonna be, the outcome of that's gonna be depending on what you put into it. So if you study all these esoteric things, you really put your heart and soul into it, you go down the path of initiation, you really start to see the world for what it is, then yes, you're gonna have a much brighter rebirth experience, or the spiritual resurrection while you're here in the physical world, in the now. Alrighty. Getting a little distracted. Let's continue. Yeah, we discussed the connection with the third degree, which is all about the resurrection, that theme. And this whole idea of a living resurrection. Obviously, coming to this understanding of Christ within our hearts in the here and now, rather than waiting for heaven or waiting afterwards, it definitely goes against the authority of particularly the Roman Catholic Church. All their authority stems from the experiences of Jesus' resurrection by the 12 favorite apostles. This close, unchallengeable experience had enormous implications for the political structure of the early church. So restricted leadership to apostles and their descendants, rather than, the leadership being given to those who, it shouldn't be about like where you came from or who your parents are. It should be about like the good that you've done, the good that you can do for humanity, the pureness of your heart, the true, unadulterated righteousness of your soul. That should be the true qualifications of a leader in any situation, I would think. Today, the Pope derives his authority straight from Peter. It says that the line, continues like all the way to St. Peter, which is, quite interesting. I don't know how they would have. Well, it is possible they haven't deviated from the family line, or, they must have given the bishop, if they weren't related, must have endowed him, with the authority somehow. I'm not sure how that all works. They even say that all our presidents are, like, related and stuff. Even, like, George Washington and Barack Obama can be traced on a family tree. It's really quite interesting stuff when you get into royalty and religious groups and how they're, like, related and they keep the bloodlines going and stuff. Let's see. We're still on page 39. If you're following along in your book, I haven't really been shouting out the page number much. But yeah, the church kind of like hoarded a whole bunch of information and then kind of kept it secret. Let's see. Yeah, and we were talking about the whole idea of leadership coming from outside. But it's the inner authority equals or surpasses the apostles and the successors. So it's, Christ entering your heart, truly, and you breaking down the ego and breaking down the undesirable things within yourself. And that's kind of what the whole craft of like masonry is about. It's like trying to get rid of like what doesn't serve us or isn't serving ourselves or others. It's literally just holding us down and kind of crafting ourselves into a better version of ourselves. Not about being better than others, just being better than our previous selves. The Gnostics quoted the secret tradition of Jesus' teachings as recorded in his speech to his disciples in Matthew. To you it has been given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. But yeah, the Gnostics recognized the theory of their secret knowledge, that with this inner light, their own authority equals or surpasses, as I said before, that of the apostles and their successors. Irenaeus, he's the father of Catholic theology, and he was the most important theologian of the 2nd century AD, saw the dangers to the church. You can see in this quote, it says, they consider themselves mature so that no one can be compared with them in the greatness of their gnosis, not even if you mention Peter or Paul or any of the other apostles. They imagine that they themselves have discovered more than the apostles and that the apostles preach the gospel still under the influence of Jewish opinions, but they themselves are wiser and more intelligent than the apostles. It's not really saying that they're more intelligent, it's just saying that they're like trying to get that direct access, that direct gnosis from the source, rather than trying to receive it from religious text or from religious authorities. On page 40. So yeah, there was like this rivalry between the private like Gnostic texts and what the religious authorities claimed as, kosher or whatever. This is a quote from in the Gnostic Apocalypse of Peter. The Orthodox church's claim to religious authority is undermined. He says, those who name themselves bishop and deacon and act as if they had received their authority from God are in reality waterless canals. Although they do not understand mystery, they boast that the mystery of truth belongs to them alone. They have misinterpreted that apostles' teachings and have set up an imitation church in place of the true Christian brotherhood. And that brotherhood term will be key, as we will see later on. Let me find my spot here real quick. Yeah, and I have put on some sounds in the background this time. I've got some 432 hertz going on. 432 hertz is supposed to help with stress, and it just helps raise your vibration and stuff. I wanted a little bit of background noise. These videos are pretty laid back for the most part. I'm just trying to get the stuff out as quick as I can. Get some coffee in me. There was a part that I had found and I made a note of, but I cannot find it. Okay. But yeah, it's kind of, I put a quote here, and it's, "Forgive them, Father," something along the lines of, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do," because it does get kind of frustrating sometimes, when you're trying to really understand, what the teachings are actually tell you, and they've been so misinterpreted by people over time. Religious texts back in the day were not to be read or viewed by the general public, and there was a reason for that, because they knew that they would be so misunderstood. Of course, it gave the people an authority, power, because they had understanding of the religious texts and the secret knowledge. But the general person, they didn't want to read them. They didn't want to read the text because they knew that the symbols and everything would be so misunderstood. So you just have to remember, it's everyone's like where they're at in their learning process. It's not like a competition. Forgive them, the Father, they know not what they do. That's just something, there's a lot of people I feel like I wish I could help out a lot more, but sometimes they just kind of have to help themselves. I can only do so much. Let's see. Now I'm on page 41. Okay, we've got some quotes here from the Gospel of Thomas, and they directly correspond to the Mark Mason's ritual, which is the 4th degree of Masonry. That's after the Master Mason degree, and you start to go down the York Rite branch. That's going to be the 4th degree, and they all have a reference to a stone. Jesus said, "Show me the stone which the builders have rejected. That one is the cornerstone." Now, we were aware that similar passages occur in the New Testament. There's 3 different verses here. Jesus saith unto them, "Did you never read in the Scriptures, the stone which the builders rejected, the same has become the head of the corner? This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes." Matthew 21:4. "And have you not read the Scripture, the stone which the builders rejected has become the head of the corner?" Mark 12:10. "And he beheld them and said, What is this then that is written? The stone which the builders rejected, the same has become the head of the corner." Luke 20:17. All right. What's interesting, though, is that only in the Gospel of Thomas does he demand that the stone be shown, which the builders have rejected. In an exact parallel of the ritual of the Masonic Mark Masonry degree. It is an interesting note. And that whole idea of like the foundation or a cornerstone or something. If you are a Freemason, think of the northeast corner. That should pop up some, symbols and get your mind stirring a little bit. Maybe study that topic a little bit more. Here we go. We found the story of that apostle building a fine palace in heaven in the Acts of Thomas. By means of good works on earth, this story is the epitome of the address in the northeast corner. So there we go. While these points were interesting, they did not seem enough to explain the behavior of the Knights Templar, which was the initial reason for our perusal of these texts. So even though they had, in this chapter, they went into like Gnostic Christianity, they didn't really find anything yet that told them exactly what they were looking for. They had this connection, the parallels with the tenets of Freemasonry and the idea that people should undergo a resurrection while still alive. But they needed to look more closely at the formation of the early church if they were ever going to figure out what it is exactly that the Templars found. All right. Let's see if there's anything worth reading in this last little bit here. In the Nag Hammadi discoveries, hidden between 350 and 400 AD and rediscovered in Egypt, we found quite a different interpretation of the truth behind the resurrection of Jesus. Here was a Gnostic Christian tradition of a living resurrection ceremony, which reminded us strongly of the Masonic third degree. It goes on to pretty much cover all the things that we've already said, because it's just summarizing everything here at the end. All right. So, yeah, I was thinking that maybe at Herod's temple that the Templars had, gotten a hold of either the Dead Sea Scrolls or these Gospels. But as they're saying here, we're not really sure what it is that they found yet. So that's going to be coming in later chapters. So yeah, this is part 4 of the Hiram Key. Just kind of taking my time going over the book, giving my viewpoints as I'm reviewing it. I hope you enjoy these videos. I'm going to be getting over to reviewing Morals and Dogma. I'm going to be starting that one. I just finished my Starseed series. There's 3 videos in that, so check that out if you want to. And then at some point, I would like to get back into the ceremonial magic topic and discuss the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, and kind of get back to the tarot, Kabbalah, Tree of Life type stuff. There's so many topics to cover on this channel, so it's kind of really a never-ending journey. I hope you enjoy what you've watched. I hope you can stand listening to my voice, and that these videos are somewhat enjoyable for you. If you like what you've watched so far, please subscribe. Click the little bell if you want to know when I get new videos, or when I upload new videos. Alrighty, I'm going to get off of here. Have a wonderful day.